This woman has gone from being a popular fashion model to becoming one of the most terrifying and cruel overseas in the SS concentration camp in Stratford. Despite having a huge number of photos taken through her life, her most famous photo is one where she's already dead. So sit comfortably, my dear ones, because it's horrifying. Jenny-Wanda Barkmann was born on May 30 in 1922 in Hamburg, in what was then known as Weimar Republic, modern-day Germany. From early childhood, the girl was constantly surrounded by attention and never suffered from a lack of it. In the future, as she grew up, partly due to her striking appearance, she was remembered as a child with a truly angelic face. Moreover, the face a blue-eyed blonde, which later during Adolf's rule would work in her favor. After all, a truly beautiful future awaited Jenny. During her school years, she often heard from her friends something like, "Hey, do you know you could be a real model?" And it seems that this idea deeply ingrained itself in her mind, because all she dreamed about was shining on the covers of Germany's most famous publications, and maybe even beyond Germany. Well, in the end she did appear in many places, but not to say that she shone. Well, take a look for yourself until the end and draw your own conclusion. After completing her schooling, Jenny immediately enrolled in a performing arts studio in Hamburg, where she quickly gained not only new knowledge, but also connections, as they say, useful ones, which eventually helped her land her first cover shot for a not-so-well-known Hamburg magazine. But nonetheless, Jenny liked everything about it: the process of shooting, the feeling of her own significance, and of course the popularity. It was 1940s, no TikToks or YouTubes. For an average person who wasn't involved in media activities, getting into any newspaper or magazine was like instantly becoming a blogger with an audience. Well, in Barkmann's case, it was like being an Instagram influencer who doesn't even caption her posts. By the way, initially she only modeled for fashion publications, but soon she started accepting work in other magazines, men's magazines, where she appeared. Well, let's just say, for them she didn't pose very modestly. Jenny worked as a model from around the mid-1940s until December 1943. After that, her career took a completely different path. My dears, a completely different one. In early 1942, the German Nazis decided to expand their staff by recruiting from the civilian population, because for positions such as communications officers, staff assistants, guards, or overseers in concentration camps, it was not necessary to have military knowledge or skills. It was mostly enough to have the desire to engage in such work. But perhaps it was Hitler's fault. It was his war, Hitler's war, right? In addition, the Nazis offered truly high salaries and prospects for career advancement, the opportunity to stand out in the big, lab-stinking crowd, or, as I would say, to dehumanize oneself. One day, Jenny-Wanda Barkmann simply saw an advertisement in newspaper, specifically an advertisement from SS, looking for workers in a concentration camp, full social package and friendly team guaranteed. Miraculously, Jenny became very interested in this offer and the possibilities it presented. And, my dears, I'm not talking about money or fame, because she already had that. I'm talking about something else. In January 1944, Barkmann arrived in occupied Poland, where she took on the position of overseas in the Stratford concentration camp, located near the city of Gdansk. From the moment this camp was established in 1939 until the very end of World War II. Approximately 110,000 prisoners were registered there, and around 65,000 of them remained in the camp forever. The most horrifying things happened there: medical experiments, torture, the producing of soap from human bodies, and much more. When Jenny took on her new duties in Stratford, she was only 22 years old. Very soon, behind Barkmann's angelic face, everyone could see the true demon. I mean, not only the prisoners of Stratford, but also other camp workers. In fact, some members of the SS were astonished by how personality blue-eyed Jenny approached her work. She was considered the cruelest and, more importantly, the most intensive overseas in Stratford. She particularly despised female prisoners. Dozens of them died as they simply beat them with a stick and leather belt. Furthermore, she personally selected those who were sent to the gas chambers. And that's not even the worst part. Barkmann took great pleasure in separating children from their parents. Wait, this feels like in another country east of Ukraine that does the same thing. Well, those who do you call them? The ones with unblown shoots not fully inflated for them to stick out. So despite all the trash that Jenny Barkmann did and how everyone feared her, no one denied that she was incredibly beautiful. The prisoners even nicknamed her the lovely executioner. Personally, I don't find her beautiful. If you happen to be interested in my opinion, even if I didn't know what she did in her life, I simply don't like her. How about you? Do you consider her beautiful or not? Unlike most of her colleagues, unfortunately, Jenny was very inventive and constantly improved her own methods of torture. When ordinary beatings no longer satisfied her, she brought local doctors to the concentration camp, forcing them to conduct medical experiments on the fellow prisoners. All they were meant to do was inflict pain, nothing else. Newly arrived prisoners were often deceived by Jenny's appearance and the smile with which she greeted them, thinking this person doesn't mean anyone harm. Perhaps even the opposite. And very soon they realized that it wasn't the case, to put it mildly. And it was better to never look at her, because sometimes all it took for her to send someone to the gas chamber was just one look. Approximately that's how Jenny spent the entire year of 1944 in Stuttgart. In May 1945, Soviet troops approached Stuttgart, liberating Poland from the Nazis. However, in order to eventually make Poland the People's Republic of Poland. Well, the Soviets had their own peculiar notation of liberation, as we already know. But that's another story. The Nazis, realizing what was coming, evacuated about 11,000 prisoners, but they simply shot 3,000. Most of them were Jews. After that, most of the camp workers attempt to escape the country. Some succeed, some didn't, and some didn't even try. Barkmann belonged to the latter group. It's unknown what drove her, but for some reason she decided to stay in Gdansk. And when she finally decided to leave the country, they simply went to the main train station of the city and bluntly tried to leave by train, not even hiding her identity. A brilliant plan, of course. But here is the thing. The survivors' testimonies from Stuttgart were mostly about the beautiful ghost, that is, about Jenny Barkmann. At the time, she was one of the most wanted women in all of Europe. Who knows, one can only speculate that's why she decided to escape in such a way. You know, like no one would expect such audacity. But judging from the photo that will appear at the end of the video, she didn't succeed. Of course not. The military police immediately apprehended the woman. After that, she was identified and sent to prison. Once there, she unleashed all the charm she was capable of and flirted with the guard, trying to convince him of her innocence. She claimed that many of the prisoners in the concentration camp owed their lives to her. All she needed to prove was to escape from prison, possibly with someone's help, and it could work. However, the guard on duty that day turned out to be a Jew who had lost his daughter and wife in Stuttgart. So this didn't stand a chance. Soon the trial began, where she was being tried alongside 4 other overseas. For each session, Barkmann would come with perfectly styled hair, constantly changing her outfits and openly flirting with the guards. Look at this photo, where she sits next to her lawyer. At first, Barkmann denied all the accusations. She claimed that the Gestapo had threatened her family with repression if she didn't cooperate, but it didn't sound very convincing. Then she started saying something else, that she had actually joined the concentration camp, but solely to alleviate the suffering of those who were there. Ironically, she was the one creating their torment, considering that some of their former prisoners testified against her. This version didn't work either. Ultimately, Barkmann started speaking her true thoughts with a smile on her face. She vividly described her favorite tortures and recounted how she personally killed women and children. All masks were off, At the end of the trial, she was sentenced to death by hanging. Upon hearing the verdict, she said the following: "Life is indeed great pleasure, and pleasure is usually short-lived." On 1st July in 1946, the former German model and one of the cruelest assassins overseas was hanged on Biskupia Gorka, along with other employees from Stuttgart. Almost 200,000 people came to witness their execution. According to some testimonies, Barkmann didn't die immediately. In short, the women who were to be hanged were transported by truck to the designated spot. They had a noose placed around their necks, and then the truck would drive away. But when it was Jenny's turn, the truck simply stalled. And at that moment, some other woman from the croft rushed forward and pushed Barkmann off the truck. That's supposedly how she died. But there is some testimony suggestions that she was simply hanged. The truck drove away, and that was it. Another point to note is that if you read about this woman's fate on Wikipedia, you will come across the following. Her body was creamed and the ashes were publicly washed down in a restroom of the house where she was born. Also, particularly, all European sources state that it is just a legend surrounding her death. And in reality, things were not like that. Her body was actually handed over for educational purposes to the Department of Anatomy and Neurobiology at the Gdansk Medical Academy. Well, that's all from me. Thank you for your attention and see you in the next video. Goodbye, my friends.